Day 24 of the war with Iran, and here's where things stand. Gas prices are now more than $1 a gallon higher than they were just a month ago, and the Trump administration has eased sanctions on oil from Iran, the country that we are at war with. And a series of head-spinning announcements from Donald Trump has made it even less clear whether we're about to see an end to the war or an escalation, or just whether, in the face of growing economic concerns, Trump simply blinked. Let's begin with the threat that had the world on edge all weekend. Donald Trump threatened to attack Iran's power plants if the regime did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a critical shipping route for a fifth of the world's oil. It was an ultimatum they had 48 hours to comply. Then, this morning, just ahead of the market's opening here in the U.S., Trump announced on Truth Social that he was postponing strikes on Iran's power grid for at least 5 days, and that the U.S. and Iran were negotiating an end to the war. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has no official role in the government, are leading the negotiations on the U.S. side. That's according to Trump. The price of oil fell almost immediately, even though Iran says that no such talks are taking place. Here's what Trump had to say about it just this morning.
Mr. President, Iran's foreign ministry says you're not telling the truth when it comes to productive conversations to end the war.
Well, they're going to have to get themselves better public relations people. We have had very, very strong talks.
Stop speaking with, Mr. President.
Speaking with in Iran.
A top person.
Is that the Supreme Leader?
No, not the Supreme Leader.
Well, Trump was, as you can see there, incredibly vague on the details of his talks. He was even more vague when it came to questions of what he wanted out of these talks.
Will Iran still be able to control the flow of oil?
Be jointly controlled.
By whom?
Maybe me. Maybe me.
You want the United States to be in
Me
control
and the Ayatollah, whoever the Ayatollah is, whoever the next Ayatollah. And there'll also be a form of a very serious form of a regime change. They want peace. They've agreed they will not have a nuclear weapon, et cetera, but we'll see.
Okay, to sum it all up, Trump is saying that talks are underway and Iran has already backed off of its nuclear ambitions. But Trump won't say who the administration is talking to, although it's not the Supreme Leader, which is the son of the leader killed in an Israeli airstrike in the first day of this war. Trump also claiming that there will be regime change, although, again, the Iranian regime has replaced one dictator with that dictator's son. Trump backing off a potentially major escalation in his war with Iran as he makes conflicting claims about an end to the conflict, and talks with Iran is where we start today. Lieutenant General Mark Hertling is here. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. And with me at the table, NPR national security correspondent Greg Myrie. He has spent years as a foreign correspondent covering conflicts around the globe, including the Middle East. And writer and editor for Protect Democracy, Amanda Carpenter, is here with me at the table. It is good to see you all. Greg, were there talks? What do we know about the possibility of these talks?
Well, depends who you believe. Trump says no. Iran says yes. It seems, and I emphasize seems, there may have been indirect talks that perhaps Oman or some other country is acting as an intermediary at this stage, but nothing official that we've seen. So I think the key will be keep an eye on Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, see if they head off somewhere. And President Trump, we're hitting that point in the war where there's not a lot of movement on the battlefield. There's a sort of regular daily pattern here, so you can kind of escalate or de-escalate if you want to change the notion. Trump's trying to do both. He was talking over the weekend about smashing Iranian power plants. Today, he's talking about possible peace deals. So he's kind of all over the map right now. I'm so struck, Amanda, by the number of caveats we had to put in that script, given that the President of the United States is not a reliable narrator generally, and specifically during wartime.
Yeah, I mean, what is extraordinary to me is that we are being walked into a war, and it seems like nobody wants to talk about it because we do not understand what is happening. I mean, this seems to me to be a deliberate strategy. But on the other hand, Trump has gone to the public and said that we have decimated the leadership. True. We have obliterated facilities many times over. Iran is not getting a nuclear weapon. So what is the end goal? Like, why can they not articulate some kind of strategy? And on the other hand, why isn't there any political opposition demanding it? Even from the MAGA coalition, we know that Iran and going into the Mideast again splits the coalition. But I spent the day listening to conservative media, just trying to understand, where are they at on this? This is the war no one wants to talk about. They are deliberately focusing, I think, on the SAVE Act, trying to assign political blame for the DHS dysfunction on Democrats. And this is just like a non-factor. And to me, that is just extraordinary, given that Donald Trump came into office largely by being the anti-Iraq war Republican who was willing to challenge, the conventional wisdom on that. And somehow he continues to get a free pass on this. And I think people really just have to demand answers. What are we doing and why?
What are we doing? Why, General Hertling, especially when you have 50,000 U.S. troops already in the region, when we're reporting 2,200 to 2,500 Marines being deployed from California to the region? All of it raising the prospect of boots on the ground. Your sense, when Amanda talks about the lack of clarity around an objective here, is the president just looking for an off-ramp?
Not just the lack of clarity around the objective, Alicia, it's also the lack of clarity around speech. I mean, when he gave the pronouncement on Saturday, I think it was, that there would be 48 hours before attack came, I immediately started questioning it myself, saying that's impossible to do. You don't change targeting data that quickly, especially against those kind of targets. And beyond that, every single thing that he was talking about hitting would have been an element of a war crime. So I would suspect that most of the military commanders would have said that to him when the reports started coming in that there would be such a rabid response on the part of the Iranians to any kind of attack that would cause that much damage among the civilian population, that I think his advisors started talking him back from the precipice. And in fact, he retreated from it very quickly, I think, when people gave him the implications of the things he was saying. So now we not only have a chaotic strategy, we also have last-minute discussions and orders to do things that haven't been planned out. From the military perspective, to answer your question, I don't know what an operational objective would be to bring Marines or other troops into the area for the kind of campaign they're waging right now. Now, certainly, I don't have to know that because I'm not in the intelligence channel and I don't have a security clearance. But usually when a president goes to war, he convinces the American people to support him. When that doesn't occur, it's a chaotic and dysfunctional war, and that's what we're seeing right now.
And I'm going to come back to you, General Hertling, on what we have heard from some elected Republicans about the reality of boots on the ground. But first, Greg, I want to make sure I come to you because the president said today that Iran has agreed to not build nukes. Here's the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Ralph Grossi, on CBS. Take a listen.
We still need to find a framework, an agreed framework that is going to be providing us with the necessary previsibility and sense of a clear idea of where they are, what they want to go.
Because this war will not destroy Iran's nuclear ambitions and capabilities.
I would say anywhere.
Anywhere.
Unless it was nuclear war and you go for destruction in an unfathomable way, which we hope, of course, will never be the case.
Help me understand that in the context of what we've heard from the President of the United States.
Right. Well, it seems to be a big gap or a big contradiction here. Iran has not had its nuclear material seen by the International Atomic Energy Agency or anybody else since last year. Trump is suddenly saying that Iran might be, is willing to give up its nuclear stockpiles, that its program will be effectively dismantled. This has come out of nowhere, and it's really hard to imagine that. It's hard to believe that they've had any kind of serious talks. I'm sure that's an issue the U.S. will raise, but that's something that takes time to work through. And at this point, that's one of Iran's best cards. Is they've got this highly enriched uranium that is somewhere, perhaps under a mountain in Isfahan and perhaps a couple other places. They're not going to give that up easily. So this would require detailed negotiations and concessions by the United States. That's not something Iran is going to give away.
The contours, to me, of this discussion is, one, what we can and cannot believe from this president based on his own description of where we are. There's this question of objectives. They were not clear going in. It seems now they are trying to work backwards from what is possible, so then they will state that as the objective, as though it has been from the beginning. And then this question of what it means for our friends and allies around the globe, the way this president has spoken with them, engaged them on this issue. On the Strait of Hormuz, Trump said over the weekend he wanted the countries who use the Strait of Hormuz to police it. Richard Haass, you see often on this network, President Emerita of the Council of Foreign Relations, put it this way, and I thought it was quite perfect. Think of it as a new Trump doctrine for the Middle East. We broke it, but you own it. Right? I mean, we now are going in, making a mess, and the president is trying to hand that off to our allies. Who then wants to be our ally?
Yeah, and that might even be a rosy situation, right? I think, as you mentioned, the biggest challenge of Trump 2.0, as it was in the first one, but to a more extreme level, is trying to figure out what is true and what is not. You mentioned that you think, and I think this is probably right, when we're looking to find out information about what is happening in Iran, we should be looking at Witkoff and Jared Kushner. That is a terrible situation to be in, where we have to read the tea leaves for the president's son-in-law to find out what is happening about our war in Iran. I mean, you look at the messengers that they send out to speak about this. I mean, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is probably one of the most visible figures. Why is that? I mean, they're treating this almost like it's only an economic story, and I don't think that's positive for them because they don't have a plan to deal with $4 gas. But even taken at face value, why are we listening to Scott Bessent speak about this? We have no point of information to go to even get an official government line, even knowing that may be flawed.